Law enforcement officers are expected to serve their communities with integrity and justice, but some corrupt cops seize every opportunity they get to fire at unarmed victims, and others are just plain negligent. Justice eventually catches up with these cops and they're sent to jail. But what happens to them there? Here are some cases showing what happens when corrupt cops end up in prison. Meet Michael Slager. On April 4, 2015, Walter Scott, a 50-year-old black man, was fatally shot by Michael Slager, a local police officer in North Charleston, South Carolina, United States. It was reported that Michael immediately called dispatch and mentioned that the victim had reached for his taser, so he fired shots. Scott has been stopped for a non-functioning brake light and then took to his heels, for reasons we may never know. Slager followed him shortly after and tried to tase him. The two could be seen tumbling to the ground after Slager hit Scott with a taser. Authorities said their investigation found Scott got back up and was shot from a distance of about 15 feet, or 5 meters, as he ran from the officer. The entire incident was captured on a smartphone, something Slager didn't know when he initially told investigators that Scott had charged at him after stealing his taser. The video was taken by Freydon Santana, who had initially held on for fear of his life, but decided it was right to make it go viral when he saw that the victim's family may never get justice. Clarence Hatersham is an officer who is also seen on the video. He arrived after Slager had shot Scott and attempted to perform CPR, and when that didn't work, they could both be seen trying to set up an appropriate crime scene to fit Slager's report. With the case gaining a lot of traction and the public patiently waiting to see how the judicial system enforces the law, the North Charleston Police Department released a termination statement, which meant that they were cutting Slager off and wouldn't shield him from the law. His health insurance is still being paid, but it was directed to his pregnant wife, who after some time started to get death threats for the crime her husband had committed. Slager was charged with the murder after the video showing him shooting Scott from behind surfaced. The racial difference led many to believe that the shooting was racially motivated, generating a widespread controversy. Slager pleaded guilty to a federal civilian rights charge for shooting Scott in the back 5 times on April 4th of 2015. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. In prison, he was kept in isolation to keep him alive because it's never a safe space for former cops in prison, and one who irrationally shot and killed a black man certainly stands no chance of being safe. To an extent, Scott's family got closure with this sentence, but other families are not so lucky. Justine Ruszczyk was a 40-year-old Australian American who had a perfectly normal life. She got her degree as a veterinarian doctor at the University of Sydney and proceeded to explore life and find herself. This was when she went into different careers, excelling as a spiritual healer, yoga and meditation instructor, and life coach in Minnesota. It was around this time she met Don Damon, an American, and had a beautiful relationship with him, which led to them deciding to get married in August of 2017. But what Justine didn't know was that her life was about to be unexpectedly taken by a cop. On the night of July 15, 2017, she called 911 to report a possible sexual assault in an alley behind her house. When the police came in response, the case became a complete disaster as a result of sheer negligence and impulsive actions. Officers Matthew Harity and Mohammed Noor were dispatched to the scene and arrived at a dark alley, where they were startled by a loud noise, Harity told investigators. Ruszczyk then approached the driver's side of the squad car, and Noor, sitting in the passenger seat, shot and killed her. Noor later testified that his partner's terrified expression and the sight of Ruszczyk with her hand raised jolted him to shoot. Although he did not see a gun in the woman's hand, he feared his partner might be shot as she began to raise her hand, he said. Surprisingly, Noor and his partner were more or less still rookies in the police force, with Noor just being 20 months old in active service, while his partner had spent about a year in service at the time of the incident. The case sparked outrage in the US and Ruszczyk's native Australia and led to the resignation of the city police chiefs. People took to the streets, appealing for justice. Processions were done at the alley where she lost her life in the US, while in Australia, the government called on the US government to ensure that the culprits were punished. A jury tried Noor and convicted him of both third-degree murder, known as depraved mind murder, and manslaughter, and he was initially sentenced to 12.5 years in prison. However, Minnesota's highest court vacated the third-degree murder conviction last year, saying that there was insufficient evidence to sustain it. He was then resentenced to 4 years and 9 months in prison on the manslaughter charge. On the 27th of June of 2022, Noor was released after serving 2/3 of his sentence in prison. He will be spending his remaining sentence on supervised release. In court in 2019, Noor apologized to the family of Ruszczyk and said that he would think of her every day. Taking a life so tragically goes against all of that. I've lived with this and will continue to live with this. It is my burden. I wish I could relieve that burden others feel of the loss I've caused," Noor said.
"These are the people I work to serve, and I harmed them in the worst way possible. Again, I apologize."
This isn't the only unlawful shooting involving a police officer and a black civilian that left the civilian dead in Minnesota. Dante Wright is another unfortunate victim of police brutality. On April 11, 2021, a black veil was thrown over Brooklyn, Minnesota once again, as black American motorist 20-year-old Dante Wright was shot by Officer Kimberly Potter from what started as a routine traffic stop. Kimberly Potter, the officer involved in the shooting, has over 20 years of experience working with the Brooklyn Center Police Department. With her years of experience, it is expected that she would apply a lot of caution when on duty. The incident started with Wright being asked to pull over for having an expired license, and when he eventually did, a routine check of his ID showed that he had an outstanding warrant for a misdemeanor, and so they had to arrest him, but he wasn't going to give in without a fight. While the police officers got into a struggle, Kimberly Potter, in an attempt to use her taser, took out her gun instead and shot Wright on the chest at very close range. Wright managed to drive a few minutes before colliding with a vehicle. The officers caught up with him and tried to perform CPR, but it was already too late. The event saw a lot of people come out in their numbers to ask for a complete reform of the police force. The movement triggered a lot of response from the international community, especially after the tragic killing of George Floyd in May of 2020. Potter was charged with first-degree manslaughter, and her sentence hearing was on February 18, 2022, as she apologized to Wright's family at sentencing and spoke directly to his mother. "Katie, I understand a mother's love. I'm sorry I broke your heart. My heart is broken and devastated for all of you." Judge Regina Chu sentenced Potter to 2 years in prison. She was served 16 months in prison and 8 months in supervised release. She was released on April 24, 2023 from her prison terms, and her probation term ended in December of 2023. The lenient jail term given to Potter didn't go well with Wright's family and the entire black and white community, as they spoke loudly against it, condemning the jury and judge. According to Judge Chu, the case wasn't the same as the other high-profile killings, including George Floyd's death, that resulted in a 22.5-year sentence for Chauvin, the offending officer. "This is a cop who made a tragic mistake," she said. Another cop who was left off the hook on an extremely light sentence is Johannes Messerl. On the 1st of January 2009, a 22-year-old African-American, Oscar Grant, who had probably had drawn up plans for the new year, had his life taken from him by Officer Johannes Messerl. Officer Anthony Perrone and Marisol Domessi were the BRT officers on duty when an altercation on a transit train was reported. As soon as the train got to the stop station, they started detaining passengers on board, including Oscar Grant and his friends. It was reported from the video taken by the witnesses that Grant pleaded with the BRT officers to not use a taser on him, but Officer Perrone knelt on Grant's neck and told him that he was under arrest for resisting an officer. It became chaotic when the other officers came on the scene. Officer Messerl, being one of them, made an attempt to handcuff Grant, but because of Grant's position being pinned to the ground, Messerl could not reach his hands and did the unthinkable. He threw out his gun and shot Grant on the chest. Following the spread of the video taken by the incident by the witnesses, the Oakland community went about a peaceful protest, insisting that the erring officers be made to face the law. Johannes Messerl was made to undergo drug testing. He refused to give a statement invoking his rights. He went on to resign from the BART police force while an internal investigation was launched. The case got a lot of traction, and Messerl's family began to get death threats, causing them to relocate multiple times. Messerl was arrested on January 13th for the murder charges near Lake Tahoe. He stated that he had to relocate because of the death threats he and his family were getting. He pleaded not guilty during his arraignment on January 15th. He was placed on bail, and with the help of the police union fundraising, he posted bail a week later. On July 8th, Messerl was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter, but acquitted of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison, but because he had served part of it during the hearing duration, he was released on June 13th, 2011. The story involving Oscar Grant and other victims in this video illustrates how far the criminal justice system is willing to go to protect itself. At every step of the process, the police and judicial system went to extreme lengths to maintain their legitimacy.